Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 170. Reading Again. Part 1. I remembered the moment I read a novel for the first time. The texture of the soft paper touching my fingertips. The black letters blooming on a white field. The texture of the page I folded with my hands. It isn't important to read the letters. The important thing is where the letters lead you. My mother, who loved books, used to say this. At least for me, it wasn't just a saying. The gaps in the black print. My own little snow garden lay in between the letters. This space, which was too small for someone to go into, was a perfect place for a child who liked to hide. Every time a pleasant sound was heard, the letters stacked up like snow. In it, I became a hero. I had adventures, loved and dreamt. Thus, I read, and read again. I remembered the first time I was about to finish a book. It was like being deprived of the world. The protagonist and supporting characters walked off with the sentence, "They lived happily ever after," and I was left alone at the end of the story. In my vanity and sense of betrayal, my young self struggled because I couldn't stand the loneliness. This is the end? Perhaps it was similar to learning about death. For the first time, I realized that something was finite. My mother said, "This is the end. There isn't anything that comes next?" There is no next. My mother was cold as she told me a brutal truth. However, just because it is the end doesn't mean you've seen the whole story. Then she gave me wise advice. Yes? Read it again. Reread the finished story. As a child, I didn't know what this meant. Why read a story I already know? If you read it again, it will definitely be a different story. I don't want to. I was stubborn because I was afraid of feeling the deprivation again. Then my mother said, "Do you want to read it together?" Thus, I learned to read again. At first, I only saw the main character's position. The second reading showed the position of the supporting character, and the third reading showed the position of the enemy. The story changed every time I read it. The story was over, but it wasn't over. The story wouldn't end unless the reader gave up on the story. I still thought about it often. What if my mother had said something else at that time? All fiction was fake, and it would just be a loss of my life if I read it. Would I then have a lot of friends? What if I didn't study hard, wasn't bullied, and didn't run away from the reality given to me? Sparks appeared in the air, and the flowing memories were broken. Kim Dokja. You look relaxed. I turned my head and saw someone standing in the darkness. It was a presence that could easily pierce other people's dreams. Apart from a mighty God, the only possible people who could do this were prophets. However, the person here wasn't Anna Croft. Is fate bearable? I knew this face. It was a crowned wanderer dressed in old clothes. That reminded me, there was a prophet among the constellations. Poked out his eyes. It was King Oedipus of Olympus, who I met at the banquet. King Oedipus said to me, "Your fate is approaching." Fate? Hasn't it already been realized? Aren't I dead as you planned? This isn't a fate that can be avoided with a shameful story. You have to decide which side you will stand on soon. I believe you will make the right choice. I'm not on anyone's side. King Oedipus laughed. You will definitely come to Olympus. It is because no incarnation fits the story of Olympus as much as you. What are you talking about? Before I could finish speaking, my memories came back. Dokja. Shit. I remembered this. It was a bloody living room. My mother was holding a knife and standing in front of a dead man. From now on, I will read all of this again. My mother smiled towards me and said, "Thus, you have to remember well. Understood?" A nightmare was coming towards me. I heard screaming. King Oedipus's voice was heard, as if he was laughing at all the memories. Succeed the lightning carnival. Otherwise you will die forever in the following scenarios. The attribute 8 lives has been activated. Your body will be resurrected. My breath burst out of me like amniotic fluid. The second head of the snake has been sacrificed. The power of the head is intelligence. My cold skin turned warm again and my stretched muscles gained strength. This was the 4th death I had experienced. Once against the fire dragon, once against the disaster of floods, and once when dealing with nirvana. At this point, I should think about whether Yu Jonghyuk was the sunfish or if I was the sunfish. Where is this place? I looked around but I couldn't tell where I was. I only saw a white cloud-like ground and an open sky. Was this dark castle? The bonus effect has sped up the actions of your brain. Due to the resurrection bonus, my judgment of the situation became clearer and faster. I decided to look at it again from the beginning. First, there was the biggest question. Why did I die? I had been using third person's viewpoint to watch Paradise and left my body with Han Soo-young. Suddenly, my consciousness blurred and the death message emerged. There was only one conclusion. Someone killed me while I was asleep. Who was it? Han Soo-young? A new achievement has been added to your 5th story. People will know you as the Messiah who bears shame. I died at a strange time, so a weird achievement was added to my story. I didn't think it was actually shameful. The prophecy was incarnation Kim Dokja will be killed by the person he loves most. Then to kill me, they must be someone I loved. Hey Kim Dokja. You survived? In the distance, Han Soo-young was walking this way. What on earth happened? An ambush. Han Soo-young grumbled as she looked at the cloud field. It was a place where nothing could be seen except for floating clouds. It was an overly peaceful scene to be called an ambush. As soon as you fell asleep, some people appeared who were after you. I tried to stop them, but it didn't work. You ended up with a fatal wound and I carried you away while crying. Suddenly, I appeared in this place. The story flowed as naturally as the clouds, but it was unbelievable. The exclusive skill lie detection LV2 is activated. You have confirmed that the statement is true. Did you see the faces of those who attacked? Everybody was wearing a mask and I couldn't see properly. I saw a few people using detect attributes, but I didn't know them. The 3-day journey had made Han Soo-young considerably stronger. Now Han Soo-young would be 20th in the Dark Castle rankings. Yet the people broke through her to kill me, then brought us here. I couldn't come up with a plausible group, no matter how hard I thought. You didn't find out anything else? By the way, aren't you really relaxed? Who was the one suffering for 3 days? 3 days? You have been dead for 3 days. Didn't you know? That reminded me, 8 lives had a bit of a wait time. 3 days, damn. What happened to the other party members? Surely they hadn't already passed on to the next scenario? If so, all my plans would go wrong. Han Soo-young sighed. No matter how far I go, there are only clouds. I have already given up. Is that why you released your clones? Han Soo-young's clones were training in various parts of the cloud field. Han Soo-young training in hidden weapons technique, Han Soo-young training her footwork, each Han Soo-young was devoted to one skill. It is my own training. I didn't want to waste time waiting for you, and once I take back my clones, my skill proficiency increases quickly. Somehow, I discovered the secret behind how Han Soo-young could become so strong in such a short time. What? Are you a? I'm a? Damn, it is filtering something like this. Well, I have an idea of what you wanted to say. In any case, she didn't seem like just a plagiarist writer anymore. I was suddenly curious. The original description in Ways of Survival didn't describe the avatar skill in detail. It wouldn't be bad to learn a bit more about this skill. Are there no constraints on the skill? You can make infinite number of clones as long as you have the magic power? That would be a scam. Of course there are restrictions. Every time I use the skill, I share some of my memories with the avatar. Some of your memories? Then what about after the avatar dies? Then I will lose the memories. I felt a bit surprised when Han Suyang responded casually. Wasn't it a skill that could give her Alzheimer's if she made a mistake? Han Suyang read my thoughts and smiled. Don't worry. I usually use unnecessary memories. In addition, the memories will come back if I recover the clones. Sometimes, it is a problem because some go out of control. Out of control? The first time I tried creating a clone using Avatar, I gave away too many of my memories and it went out of control. Is that possible? Then did you lose those memories? Han Suyang shrugged. I don't know. But now I use small memories so it's fine. You just think that you're fine. Shut up. A clone ended up having important memories due to a mistake. I shivered as I thought about another Han Suyang that might still be moving around somewhere in Seoul. 1v1, the clones turned into smoke and returned to Han Suyang. It was probably to recover the accumulated skills proficiency. Han Suyang suddenly exclaimed, "Ah! There was something I didn't say. I just remembered. A constellation came looking for me when you died. Why give such an important memory to her clone?" I forgot the name, but the constellation belonged to a nebula. Vedas or Tamna? These names were dangerous. Regardless of how I felt, Han Suyang muttered in a relaxed manner. I heard some ambiguous words. Make the right choice, can't you remember it properly? I'm sorry. If I recall all my avatars, then I can remember. Oh, it was a strange Goryeo warrior. Goryeo warrior? He left without saying anything. He stared at your dead body for a moment and left straight away. If it was a Goryeo warrior, it was probably Chiak Jungyang. There were also Olympus, Vedas, and Tamna. The big nebulae were moving, so it seemed like something was going to happen. At this moment, something crossed my mind. Wait, a constellation appeared directly? It wasn't an avatar? Yes. It was a symbol. Why? Don't you know the problem with this? Eh? No matter how symbolic, a constellation can't appear in the scenario area without consuming a lot of probability. The constellations feared probability the most and wouldn't descend as a symbol. I slowly looked around. I think I know where this place is. This place was a ward, but it wasn't a normal ward. It was a ward where constellations could appear in symbolic form. Han Suyang belatedly noticed something. The mechanical gateway array method. The mechanical gateway array method, it was a technique used by constellations who mastered the principles of the 5 elements, for heavenly divisions and 3 calamities. By the way, it was hard to see people use this technique. Zhuge Liang of China could use it freely. Yet this was the Korean peninsula. Then, won't you come out? I spoke to the air. With the exception of Zhuge Liang, there was one other constellation who could use it freely. It was also a constellation I had already met. It seems it is impossible to deceive you with the shape of a constellation. A voice was heard as clouds gathered in the air and formed the image of a person. It was a woman in her 30s wearing a prison uniform. Haven't we met before? It isn't a very good reunion. The constellation First Spiritualist of Joseon is giggling at you. First Spiritualist of Joseon, John Wuchi's incarnation. She was the first limb of the King of Wanderers. The king is waiting for you. Somehow, I knew who had killed me. This situation appeared to be the worst. Either way, I had no other choice. I nodded and said, "Guide me." Chapter 171. Reading again. Part 2. That jerk, Kim Dokja, he forgot about me again. There was a small fortress standing on the empty plains. In fact, it was the size of a small house rather than a fortress. However, the armed weapons meant it wasn't lacking compared to a fortress. Needless to say, it was Gong Pildu's armed fortress. Do. Gong Pildu fired shells at the monsters approaching the fortress. For several weeks after entering Dark Castle, Gong Pildu had been living in a hellish monster zone. There was an endless stream of monsters. If it wasn't for the coins that Kim Dokja had previously provided him, he might have run out of magic power and died already. The Constellation Defense Master is excited about the defense game. The situation wouldn't have ended up like this if it wasn't for the perverted sponsor. It. His Dark Castle ranking had risen sharply due to all the monsters he killed. The problem was that his mental strength and magic power had reached their limits. It is up to here. Gong Pildu had a disheartened expression as he watched the armed fortress being broken down by the claws of the monster. At this time, something golden flew in the distance. It was a powerful ether storm that broke apart the whole field. He wondered if it was Kim Dokja, but the person was unexpected. Yu Jonghyuk? A huge dragon was flying through the storm. On top of it, there were two people Gong Pildu knew. Strength went out of Gong Pildu's body and the fortress collapsed. Yu Jonghyuk ran like the flash and caught the falling Gong Pildu. I overused the power of transcendence. For the time being, I must preserve my strength. Yu Jonghyuk thought as he glanced at his right arm. The hand that was holding the sword was swollen and red. It wasn't the power of his sponsor, but transcendence was also affected by the probability. The situation would improve as the restrictions were gradually lifted. However, the probability allowed in the ninth scenario wasn't enough for him to take full advantage of transcendence. I have recovered Gong Pildu. Li Sielwa is steadily raising her ranking in the Western field. His plan was progressing steadily. The situation was smoother than any previous scenarios. Now the only thing left is Kim Dokja. Yu Jonghyuk thought as he looked towards the Western plains. The fate of Starstream isn't that lax. What are you going to do, Kim Dokja? Don't worry. There is a way out. That woman isn't the only problem. There are many tough people. Moreover, how are you going to deal with the mechanical gateway array method? There isn't a way to break the mechanical gateway array method. Han Suyang and I were walking through the mechanical gateway array method while following the incarnation of John Wuqi, Cho Young Ran. I saw that she was floating, not walking, and thought she definitely fit the incarnation of John Wuqi. John Wuqi. Along with Han Gildong, he was one with the power to enter the peak of the Korean constellations. Han Suyang noticed her and spoke again. By the way, wasn't the King of Wanderers killed by the reincarnator? She isn't someone who will die so easily. Come to think of it, you said that you know the King of Wanderers. Tell me precisely. What is your relationship? A light sigh emerged at the question. It is the most complicated relationship in the world. I feel disgusted. An old girlfriend? My mother. What? Really? I'm sorry. Han Suyang stuttered in an unusually embarrassed manner. As if hearing our conversation, Cho Youngran looked back with a stiff expression. Follow exactly where I am stepping. If you step on another place, you will get lost. I thought it would be like this. All mechanical gateway array methods were the same. If you didn't go through the proper path, you would get lost. I asked a slightly disgruntled tone, can't you just turn it off? It is difficult. I don't know what you will do. How funny. You killed me, and now you're afraid of me. I know you are capable of resurrection. Does that let you kill me willy-nilly? I'm sorry for that. In addition, I wasn't moving to kill you. I attacked the woman and she used you as a shield. What? I turned around and saw Han Soo-young whistling. I watched Han Soo-young smiling and thought about hitting her head. I would question her about it later. I might have 8 lives, but, wait, it was 6 lives now. I glanced back towards Cho Young-ran and asked, "Why are you helping my mother?" Cho Young-ran paused at my sudden question. "I honestly don't know why someone like you is following an incarnation. The first spiritualist of Joseon can become a king right now." "How do you know my sponsor?" "It is obviously a Korean constellation who can use the mechanical gateway array method." John Woo-chi wasn't a narrative-grade constellation, but he had many advantages in the early scenarios, because the consumption of probability when using his power was small. Moreover, according to the progress of the scenario, the fame and stories that could be built up were overwhelming compared to other constellations of the same rating. It was the reason why Yoo Jong-hyuk tried to recruit John Woo-chi as a colleague in the early scenarios. Cho Young-ran replied, "I'm not suitable to be a king." "Did my mother grab your weakness or something?" Cho Young-ran was going to say something, only to close her mouth again. I said to her, "Tell me honestly. I can help you. You are being deceived by that person. John Woo-chi would be a great power if I could get his incarnation on my side." Of course, I didn't expect much. "She saved my daughter." "It was as expected." "I see. Saving the life of your child, of course, you would be loyal after something like that." Cho Young-ran's eyebrows twitched at my words. "Is that a sarcastic tone?" "That's right. I think saving that life is intentional." "Intentional?" "My mother, isn't there something strange about her?" "What?" "She is overly adaptive to the world or knows a lot of information that shouldn't be known at this point." Han Soo-young looked at me with a confused expression because she didn't know what I was trying to do. Cho Young-ran wondered, "What do you want to say?" "What do I want to say?" "My mother knew what constellation you would get. Maybe she saved your daughter for the purpose of trying to use you." "She is such a person." Cho Young-ran. I didn't remember precisely, but it seemed a woman with this name had once been John Woo-chi's incarnation. A character who lost her daughter and became John Woo-chi's incarnation decided to get revenge on the world. I didn't know when I told my mother the story, but if she heard it from me and remembered the information, it wasn't an exaggeration to think my mother would use it. However, unexpected words emerged from Cho Young-ran's mouth. "You're mistaken about her." "Mistaken?" Cho Young-ran gazed at me in a strange way. It was filled with unpleasant sympathy and was the type of gaze I hated. "Sukiyanya Sasai isn't as bad as you think." Was it because repulsion was surging inside me? I replied bluntly, "Nobody knows her better than me. Originally, it is the child who doesn't know anything about their parents. In any case, we've arrived." I suddenly saw something that was like a front door. Cho Young-ran spoke towards Han Soo-young. "Girl, you can't enter. Wait with me. Che, your mother seems very shy. Be safe." I nodded and brought my hand to the front door. Behind this door was probably the strongest enemy in the current scenario. Cho Young-ran told me, "There is a bell." Ding dong. Somehow, the quaint ringtone stimulated familiar memories. It was a ringtone I seemed to have heard a long time ago. Then my mother's voice was heard from inside the door. "Come in." The door opened and the familiar entrance of a house appeared. A few pairs of shoes were placed neatly together. Some of them were small enough to belong to children. My sense of déjà vu was even worse. The interior of the house was familiar. It wasn't too flashy or old-fashioned, but the small decorations showed it was a person with some sense of style. I entered the living room and saw a familiar room. There were the forgotten wall clock and the television. I knew the texture of the sofa without needing to sit on it. The location of the table was also familiar. The fourth wall is shaking. Really, this was a terrible hobby. My mother was sitting on the sofa of the living room, dressed in elegant clothes. She asked me, "It took a long time. How does it feel to be home after a long time?" "I would rather remain dead." "I'm glad that you are healthy." "Thanks to someone, I just died and came back to life." Maybe my mother chose this place to seize the initiative. The dialogue from now on would be a battleground to determine the outcome of the next two scenarios. "I heard Nirvana killed you. How are you alive?" "I wouldn't be fooled by such a person." "Have you forgotten?" "I also have a lot of information about the future." I had expected it. Still, my mother managed to deceive Nirvana. I had no idea what this person was capable of. Perhaps the most threatening thing to me at present wasn't Yu Jonghyuk or the constellations, but this woman. "You were alive yet you didn't come to my funeral." Why would I go to a funeral when I was the unfortunate one left behind? "You thought it wasn't enough and had your people kill me once more." "I killed you once more because you are an irresponsible son." "Do you need a funeral this time as well?" "I saw that you have many good colleagues. They didn't know you were going to rise again," and cried. The person saying this was my mother. I took a deep breath. I could never be careless when talking to my mother. From now on, it would be the real thing. "Why did you kill me?" My mother laughed and replied. "Incarnation Kim Dokjo will be killed by the person he loves most." "How do you know that?" Yusanga SSI told me. She asked me to save you. Yusanga must have visited my mother. "By the way, you came with another girl this time. Have your tastes changed?" "Honestly, I like Yusanga more." "Don't pay attention to unnecessary things. I don't understand you the more you talk." "Why did you kill me when you were asked to save me?" "The prophecy came true, thanks to me." "Isn't that right?" "Huh?" My mind became complicated. "No," she was saying. My mother continued, "It said it in the prophecy. The person you love most. Thus, I killed you." It was ridiculous that the person I hated more than anyone else would say this. Even so, the moment I heard it, I was disturbed by a feeling I couldn't express well. I definitely hated my mother. My life was a mess because my mother ruined it. Yet, my mood was complicated. "I see. You killed me because you thought you were the one I love most? Is this fate? Doesn't it often appear in your favorite novel? If so, you have completely failed. Obviously, fate told me that I would be killed by the person I loved most. If so, my last death should have made my fate come true. I am still receiving the fate message. It was true. A little while ago, the infernal message entered my ears. A huge fate is hoping for your definite death." A modified was even added. It was a definite death. The words of King Oedipus in my dreams were correct. I couldn't escape this fate with the story 8 Lives. At the very least, you aren't the person I love most. Chapter 172. Reading again. Part 3. My mother was silent for a moment. The silence cheered me up a bit. The fact that my mother expected me to love her and the idea that I could hurt her feelings excited me. However, my mother spoke in a tone that sounded like she had expected it. I see. I still wanted to try it. It could have ended your fate. In any case, you still have a lot of lives left. Don't speak like you are doing this for me. I love you. I got goosebumps. Why was she suddenly saying this? What does this mean? I am your mother. I looked at my smiling mother and one corner of my heart ached. Did she really believe that such words were acceptable? A decade's worth of suffering alone couldn't be denied because of these words. I glared at my mother. Mother, love. I didn't use lie detection on her. Sometimes there were such words in the world. Even if it was true, it was painful enough to be called false. I sighed and said, "It's too late." "I know." "Then why?" "I just wanted to say it once." "I don't think I've ever told you before." We fell silent and didn't say anything for a while. Only the second hand of the wall clock told me that time was passing by. It was like a page with nothing on it. Like a writer squeezing out my first sentence, I barely managed to open my mouth. "How was your life in prison? You often came to see me. Is there a need? You didn't tell me anything. Why didn't you say anything? I went to see you so many times. I didn't hate my mother from the beginning. Even when my mother killed my father. Even when she went to jail. Even when my relatives rushed to take our assets and I was treated like a leftover product. I didn't hate or blame my mother. How can a person be so shameless? The reason why I hated my mother was simple. Why did you remain silent? And why did you write such a story? Someone might say this, you became rich. Isn't it good that she sold the book? I didn't know if the royalties from my mother helped my life. My relatives always treated me like I wasn't a person. I had a really hard time. Whenever I went to school, walked on the streets, or met someone, it seemed like everyone was talking about me. It was the same when I moved schools. Every time, I was the son of a murderer. Those who had never experienced it would never know. The world was tenacious. The reporters stood in front of my house, and it felt like all eyes in the world were chasing me. Maybe, just maybe, I could have endured it. It might have been okay if my mother had said something to me. If she told me to endure it, I could have. If only my mother had told me she was on my side, even if she sold our story for money. The fourth wall is shaking violently. The stigma self-rationalization LV2 has been activated. I looked at my mother. I hadn't misunderstood. My mother sold our lives to earn money. Then my mother opened her mouth. I wanted to know. Know what? The truth. What is the truth? Mother, didn't you kill father? You don't know the story. I know it very well. Since separating from you, I looked over my memories again and again. In other words, I read it again. I became absorbed in the characters of the novel because of my mother. Dokja. From now on, I will read all of this again. Your father, he did something wrong and died. This was self-defense. Understood? I read it again hundreds, thousands, and even tens of thousands of times. No, I replayed it so many times that I couldn't even tell it was true anymore. It was enough for my father to die. He was a gambling addict and violent towards his family. Our family would have been in danger if he remained. The mother watched me and nodded. Yes, I remember it well. So why are you angry? I tried to ask my mother several times. Why didn't you run away with me? Why did you leave the child alone? Why didn't you come see me after you were released? The questions piled up inside me, and I got the answer on my own. The fourth wall's shaking has subsided. This was a fear created by the answer. It was an answer that I tried to erase. I was afraid that once the answer was given, I wouldn't be able to accept it. In the meantime, my mother had been repeatedly opening and closing her mouth before finally being able to speak. It is too late to say anything. Yes, I knew. Many constellations have sponsored you 5,000 coins for your family history. This was sufficient for the damn drama. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband is thirsty from your sweet potato. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire suggests that you think again. The constellation Poked Out His Eyes is smiling in an insidious manner. This role didn't suit me in the first place. Why do you keep changing the original novel? My mother changed the topic. If you let it flow like the original and let people die, the scenarios wouldn't have been so difficult. I have to change it. Mother, you know that Yu Jong-hyuk can't reach the ending in the third regression. Many constellations are frustrated by the filtering. The story about the original novel was filtered by the constellations. The ending? Yes. The ending. You are struggling just for that? You're not crazy. The ending of this story is important to me. It was this world that kept me alive while you were gone. It was thanks to the novel that I could survive the last few years without my mother and father. You can never understand. 3 ways to survive in a ruined world. I didn't know what the author intended with this title. However, this title was reality to me, not a metaphor. It was because for me, this had become a ruined world a long time ago. I read this novel on a daily basis and survived. Thus, I couldn't give up on this story. My mother refuted, this isn't a novel. There is no ending like everyone lived happily ever after in reality. I will see it through to the end. In addition, when did I say I wanted that ending? Stop. This world is crazy. It isn't something you can achieve because you know the future. Don't you already know this? The next scenarios. Stop. It was pointless to keep arguing with my mother. Just tell me what you want. Why did you call me here? Stay here. Yes, I thought she would say this. It was just like my mother. Why would I do such a thing? I can't lose my son again. I will somehow do the following scenarios. Save it. I raised my energy. Be honest. You think I will be a hindrance. I don't know what your purpose is, but I won't ask you anything. For the first time, an unfamiliar emotion crossed my mother's face. She looked sad. Sad? What qualifications did she have to feel like this? Who do you really resemble? A wave of magic power rose in my mother's body as she spoke. I dislike this method, but it can't be helped. Some constellations like this fighting in a family. Some constellations who value filial piety dislike this situation. The furniture of the house was swept away by the magical storm, causing Han Soo-young to notice and run inside. Kim Dokja. The incarnation of John Woo-chi, Cho Young-ran, was also behind Han Soo-young. The living room quickly changed into a confrontational situation. Cho Young-ran was preparing a trick while my mother gazed at me with serene eyes. John Woo-chi's techniques were tricky, but I could somehow defend against them. The problem was my mother's side. I didn't yet know who my mother's sponsor was. This was just before my mother's ability was revealed. The exclusive skilled bookmark is activated. Selecting the 4th bookmark, like an Isparang. The exclusive skill, Way of the Wind LV10, +1, is activated. Way of the Wind reached its limit and the whole room was caught in a magical storm. I condensed the winds and destroyed the entire living room. Then I escaped from the house with Han Soo-young. As dark smoke covered my field of view, I told Han Soo-young, I will finish this right away, so get ready. Understood. Han Soo-young started to generate a powerful, black fire in her hand. I immediately changed the bookmark. I will choose the 5th bookmark, Kyrios Rodgrain. The combo of miniaturization and electrification followed after Way of the Wind. The fastest and most efficient way to overpower my mother was to use the greatest skill I had. However, the moment I was about to use the skill, dozens of people appeared through the smoke. They surrounded me and spoke in fervent voices. You've misunderstood everything. Please. You have to stay here. They were my mother's subordinates. Dozens of women wearing prison uniforms looked at me with sympathetic expressions. Han Soo-young shouted, "What is this?" The surprised Han Soo-young poured the black flames towards them, but they were scattered in all directions by John Woo-chi's defense. Cho Young-ran shouted, Kim Dokja. Stop. Suk-young is doing this for you. It was my mother who blocked their mouths. She raised a finger to her mouth, telling them not to say anything. Then a grand aura started to emerge from my mother's body. Sparks formed due to the excessive use of probability. It was a more intense synchronization than anything I had seen before. My mother was obviously overdoing it. The sponsor of incarnation, Lee Suk-young, has revealed her modifier. The constellation Founder's Mother feels deep sadness towards you. The Founder's Mother? Oh my God. Don't tell me? The constellation Founder's Mother says that your strength is a threat to the Korean Peninsula scenario. The constellation Founder's Mother says that she won't take your life if you don't rebel. I hastily used miniaturization and electrification at the same time. The energy of the old land has sealed your skills. My vision became dim, as if I had entered a dark cave. Power was extinguished from my body, and I became an ordinary human. The helplessness of a small animal captivated me. The energy of the old land seals your value. I knew this stigma. There was only one story regarding sealing on the Korean Peninsula. I never thought you could use this. Yes, it was strange I hadn't thought about it. This was the Korean Peninsula. Yet there was one nebula that hadn't contacted me yet. I should have made contact with them first, but I hadn't got close to them at this point. I told you, I love you. My mother smiled while waving a bronze bell in my hand. The Founder's Mother. One of the highest-ranking constellations of Hanguk and one of the most well-known stories on this land. My mother's sponsor was Eunyo, mother of Dangun Wangyam. TL, legendary founder and god king of Gojoseon, First Kingdom of Korea. He was said to be the grandson of heaven and son of a bear. See the end of the chapter for more information on the bear woman. I sighed and said, okay. I surrender. What? Hey. Kim Dokja. Just wait here. You can't win anyway. A sense of exhaustion filled my body. Now I was no different from an ordinary person. Putting aside your sponsor, how did you get the 8-beaded bell? See link for an image. I stared at the bronze bell in my mother's hand. The 8-beaded bell was one of the 3 heavenly seals of Dangun's myth. It was one of the greatest relics of the Korean Peninsula and had the ability to seal the story of another person. No matter how I thought about it, there was no way to get this star relic through normal methods at this point. My mother must have paid a price to get it. I will let you go once it is time. Just stay here for now. Finally, my mother and the wanderers disappeared. Han Soo-young and I were trapped in the mechanical gateway array method. I was able to guess where my mother had gone. Maybe she went to see Yu Jong-hyuk. I didn't want to imagine the catastrophe that would happen if they met. Shit, what now? How are we going to get out of here? Han Soo-young asked as she tried to break the mechanical gateway array method. My skills as a constellation were sealed, so it was impossible to destroy straight away. Well, this was with my own power. I thought it over. There is one way. What is it? There is a presence that can break the mechanical gateway array method. What? Who? If I called him, the seal would somehow be broken. Originally, it was a constellation I didn't dare call, but now it was unknown. I pulled out Gampyeongwi. I saved it for an important time, and now it was the only thing I could believe in. The special option of the Gampyeongwi, Echo of the Stars, has been activated. Echo of the Stars allows you to ask for help from an upper-grade constellation. I will call the constellations. In the flow of the stars, the upper-grade constellations hear your voice. I called out the modifier of the constellation. The status of this constellation is too high. 5 points on the sky disk are required for this constellation. Will you accept this? There were only 5 points left, because I had used the rest on calling the Big Dipper and the nation's independence activist. Now this constellation required all the remaining star points on the Gampiangwi. It was necessary because this being's strength already surpassed the upper grade rank. The operation of the stars has begun. In the darkness of the deep night sky, a solitary star was shining. I declared towards him. Goryo's first sword, I need your strength.